Hello and welcome to a Therapeutic Hour. I'm your host, Michelle Overton. Whether you're here because it feels dark, you feel stuck, or you simply want to understand yourself better, you're in the right place. With over 400 types of therapy out there, it's no wonder it's hard to know where to begin. Join me and my guests as we demystify therapy and support you to self-heal. So settle in, relax, and let's begin your journey inwards together. This is a Therapeutic Hour. On today's episode, I've invited Alice Law to come and talk to us about Unstressable, the online community which Alice has co-founded with her business partner and friend Mo Godat. Alice is a stress management consultant, host of the 5-star rated podcast Unstressable. She's a writer, a meditation teacher and a Reiki master. Let's hear more from Alice about Unstressable. Okay, hey Alice. Thank you for joining me today. I know it's an incredibly exciting time as you're launching your online membership platform Unstressable and releasing your book with your business partner Mo Godat, isn't it?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to be here. I can't wait to have a conversation. And yeah, it's nice to do this kind of stuff. Like you said, it's been a busy time, so I love having these conversations.
Yeah, lovely. And so I know that I've benefited from actually being a member for the last 6 months of this community. And so I thought it'd be really helpful to share how it works. So first of all, I wanted to start with, what made you focus on stress?
Yeah, so, oh gosh, stress. Stress for me was, growing up, I was really a very calm child. I think the universe had to show me what the extreme of one end was to show me what the extreme of the other was, to see how much polarity there actually can be for people in terms of feeling happy and calm and feeling really stressed and anxious and just, depressed and all over the place. So I had a very, lucky childhood in terms of it was very happy till I was sort of 19. My parents were together, very stable, nice life, and just nice school life, and everything was, apart from teenage anxieties and the usual ups and downs like that, had a really, was very, very lucky. And then everything just sort of started to change when I was 21. Not slowly, but over an 8-year period, I experienced stress and loss in every aspect of my life all at once, continually after the other. So that began slowly when my dad, who was a successful entrepreneur before, sadly had a big, financial crisis after the 2008 credit crisis, over invested in things, and his business had to go into administration. And so we started to, lose that sort of security, the financial stress that comes with that, and selling our home, selling personal assets. My dad, he was, extremely of that generation as well, where men provide, and that was his identity, as like head of the household. And so he really, really struggled with seeing what was sort of this change, and he started to change himself. I could see him starting to get more and more stressed, understandably, and begin to get depressed. And it was during that time that my eldest half sister, Suzanne, was very sadly diagnosed with colon cancer. And so she was, a wonderful elder sister, shared the same dad, and was a wife and had 2 children, and had a 4-year battle with cancer. We thought we'd, won a few times, and then sadly, out of nowhere, she just suddenly was terminal. I was going down to her house to celebrate for a weekend. She lived in Gloucestershire. I'm in London now. We were all going down to her house, my dad, my mum, and her family, for sort of a celebratory weekend of get together. And I arrived. She asked me to pick my dad up from the village pub on the way in because I was driving, and I sort of came into the pub really happily and was like, "So how's Suzanne?" And my dad just looked down, and my family friend was like, "Oh God, has no one told you?" And I was like, you just think, oh no, something's wrong. And so my dad was like, "She wants to tell you herself." And that's when I found out she was terminal. And I just, we couldn't believe that. And it was during that time, very sadly, we lost her about probably 9 months later. after trying various alternative treatments. And it was during that time that my dad, 4 days after her funeral, my dad got rushed to hospital for a blood clot in his leg because he'd been so depressed. He'd just been lying, thinking, staring at the ceiling for days on his bed. And so he got rushed to hospital. The blood clot was resolved, but we actually found out that he had tumours again because he had cancer when I was 3 and recovered very easily. But he had tumours again in his lung and in his pancreas. And he was so depressed by this point because his business had gone under. He'd also been dealing with some legal action of people trying to falsely sue him for a loss of investment, which he actually only, from years before, people we thought of as chosen family. So it was all just a lot of horrible things. And it was his best friend who had died's family. So it was that sort of, awful, more and more things just mounting up. And something else was stolen from him in business, and he didn't have the money to sort of legally go after it. There was just, so much stress going on for him. And so at this point, having lost his daughter, he was just I've got no interest in curing my cancer and being in hospital again. And I obviously I couldn't accept this. It was I've just lost my sister. Everything's going wrong. I've lost my home. I'd had a breakup. I was just all over the place. And I thought, I'm not losing my dad as well.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of stress going on at this time. I also then got made redundant because my job was moving abroad, and they asked me if I wanted to come with them. And I was like, no. And these, my 2 bosses said, well, what do you want to do? And I thought I wanted to be in fashion at this time, still thinking I'd do my fashion collection on the side because that's what I'd done before I worked for them. And life had then taken over. So I had this sort of epiphany essentially through various universal signs being no, this is what you should be doing. This is what you should be doing. So they helped me set up my practice then. And I worked with a coach and then started training in the modalities that I knew had helped me. So when my sister originally got ill and during this period of time, I realized that everything around me I couldn't change, and it was continually one thing after the other. So I was okay, well, I've got to take control of myself then, because I'm not going to survive this. I was waking up feeling so anxious. I was scared to look at my phone in case I had more bad family news. I was going out. It was my early 20s, and I was just going out sort of drinking and partying with my friends to try and forget things. And, I just wasn't myself at all. And during that time when I realized, okay, this isn't sustainable either, I started self-studying spirituality, spiritual texts. I went to study Kabbalah. I learned about all different religions. I studied meditation and mindfulness and energy healing and EFT, and started learning about coaching and, read stuff on neuroscience and psychology. And I just was putting this all together. And eventually I was oh, wow, this stuff really, really works. So the universe obviously was giving me a kick after this to be no, this is what you should actually be doing. So I then went on to sort of train in the things that I knew worked best for me to put programs together. So things like mindfulness and EFT and meditation and Reiki and Akashics and, all these different things.
Yeah.
And started to, set up my own practice to do sort of consulting and coaching, and then do speaking in corporates. And it was all, wonderful. And then the sort of great test for it all for me, which was really what I knew I wanted to do this, but this really solidified my mission, was when my dad was rushed to hospital. So 4 years after my sister died, my dad was rushed to hospital. I thought it's probably, his cancer's finally caught up with him because he wasn't treating it. He always said, you always know. He was no, I'm of an age now, it won't grow quickly, so I'm not dealing with it, and blah, blah, blah. So I knew his sort of, I want out, but equally he was right. His cancer wasn't why we lost him in the end. He died from a burst stomach ulcer accumulated from stress that caused internal complications. And so after that time, I remember standing next to my dad actually in the funeral chapel, and I thought, I've never seen you look this peaceful in 8 years. That relaxed person who was, my dad was, before he got stressed and had all these awful things happen, he was such a charismatic and charming character. He's always got the life and soul of the table. He was amazing at telling stories. He was very relaxed. He was just had this very easy, magnetic way about him. And I looked at him then and I thought, wow, that's the person that that peace is what I used to know. Yes. And it was in that moment that I realized, okay, well, this is actually something that I want to really do to help as many people as I can to find that sense of peace whilst we're still alive, you know, and I know how much that stress not only affected myself, but how my dad's stress affected my family and me. And so it's really, that was kind of what, you know, made me realize I definitely wanted to do it. And then the universe brought Mo and I into each other's lives. And so our missions really aligned with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how really, long story short.
No, well, thank you for sharing, because that's a huge journey, isn't it, as well? As you were describing your dad, I wondered how similar you are to your dad, actually, you know, from what I've witnessed, from what I've seen so far. But so I can hear that, you know, this is where your mission, you know, has come from. And when we look at this mental health pandemic that we're experiencing as well, I think it's so important, isn't it, for people to really get to grips with stress. So can I talk about as well now then? So you've set up this online platform. So that was, I can hear that was the motivation then, was it to really meet lots of people to be able to help them with this?
Yeah, so we wanted to meet lots of people. We originally, Mo and I wrote the book Unstressable first, which it's funny how the universe works. We were getting more and more annoyed because it kept being delayed by the publishers. But actually, I think the universe was trying to get us to create this before it then launched the book, because when the book comes out, those things become so busy, and we wouldn't have actually had time to create what we've created in this lead up, which has been Unstressable, the platform like you're a member of. And so that was actually our way of, you know, books are incredible, and we've loved the book we've written, and we're really happy with it. And obviously, a lot of people will just read the book and not be a member, but we wanted to create somewhere that was also that extra space that's like, okay, I've read the book, now what? You know, so what do I do with this? What do I do with all this information, and how can I actually action that? And so that was our feeling. We wanted to create somewhere that like it could reach, you know, as many people as we want, like you say, as many as possible. Our mission with it is to try, you know, between our book and our speaking engagements and the platform, is to try to take 1 million people a year out of stress. That's mine and Mo's mission. I mean, Mo loves a number and a mission, as he always does. So like billion happy. So, you know, and that's something we really aim to do, particularly, you know, over the new year. And yeah, it's a place where we have essentially elaborated everything from the book, because the book is, you know, you can only put so much in a book, and we had to have it cut down. The publishers are like, it's too long, and we're like, well, we can't take that out. And so it's been it's a place, you know, for video trainings every monthly 7 meditations, guided Reiki meditations, online webinars, and sessions with Mo and myself, and those are recorded. And then the odd guest expert, we're going to get more of those in soon, and a community space. And so yeah, it's just really that place that we wanted to be able to give people somewhere to have a community of like-minded people as well, who want to be able to, you know, better themselves and become calmer and less stressed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, to share a little bit about my own journey here. So what I noticed is, so I lost my oldest son in December. And so for me, coming through, you know, we're not really taught how to grieve.
No.
And so when I came across, it was Mo's book, Soul for Happy, I found that really comforting. And then I know I came to your retreat, and I've joined the online community. And one of the real benefits of this online community, because I found for myself that perhaps I enjoy my own company, my own aloneness. However, I work quite a lot alone, and spend a lot of time alone. So part of being in the online community has provided a network of people with a shared purpose. So, you know, I found that incredibly helpful, as well as the coping strategies that I've been able to really, you know, turn inwards. And perhaps I might speak about some of those here. So when I came to the retreat, I know that you had a test. And so I could really get externalize my stress to have a look at what was physical, what was mental, what was emotional and spiritual. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that test, because I found it really
Yeah,
helpful.
absolutely. Yeah, I love that test, because like, our work is based on those 4 pillars. We don't look at stress as just one big bundle of stress together. And I think the reason Mo and I wanted to write this book together was because I'm sure you noticed with Mo and I align on everything each other says and does, and we have a lot of crossover, but equally there's quite a lot of yin and yang there with the sort of way that we are with each other. He's that engineer, amazing, logical mind, as well as being very emotional. And I am logical, but I'm all about the emotional, all about spirituality. And so, yeah, it's that combination really, the two that we wanted to put together for people. And so our work is on those 4 pillars. It's on the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual stress. And so the test, the online Unstressable quiz, is basically a way for you to be able to see in those different sections where you're stressed, because your stress actually presents completely differently depending on whether you're mentally stressed, whether you're emotionally, whether you're physically, whether you're spiritually stressed. And so it's getting people to see tangibly, like you say, in those sort of green, orange, red, of which each section and percentages. Okay, actually, I'm more spiritually stressed right now than I am anything else. That's interesting. And so it's getting people to see, what that is. I mean, mental stress is, looking at how when you're just completely sort of lacking focus and your thoughts are over the place and, you're overwhelmed, hard to concentrate. That emotional stress turns up when you're feeling anxious, even depressed, irritated, sad, lonely, isolated, and you actually have been repressing your emotions for quite a while and you're not really sure how you're handling them. And so they just keep being pushed down and you start to feel worse and worse and wonder why. The physical stress is obviously those aches and pains and various signals that our body sends us that we often ignore for as long as possible until our body's literally waving a red flag at us, whether it's those digestive issues and migraines or backaches, trouble sleeping, lack of memory, all those things. And then spiritual stress for me is something I love to talk about, because I actually talked about this first on Mo's podcast 4 years ago when we secondly met after my podcast. And I actually began to understand what spiritual stress was in that time period that I talked about with you earlier on this podcast, when my dad was refusing to get treatment for his cancer. So I was incredibly annoying to him at this time. I laugh about it now because I can, but I realized, I was in completely spiritual stress mode. I was looking outwards, trying to control the uncontrollable. I was, not looking inside myself to try and soothe myself. I was trying to fix everything. And my dad, I call him every day saying, have you seen the doctor? What's going on? Da, 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 da. And he'd be like, no, trying to push it off. I'm seeing him soon, haven't seen specialist. Da, da. And this was this continuous conversation, every week between him and I, which was making me more anxious and was annoying my dad. And so it was really, causing strain on our relationship as well. And so it wasn't until I, really actually sat with myself and went back to that intuition and that soul aspect and asked my soul for guidance of, what I should be doing. That I finally got the message that this wasn't my fight and I had to surrender it, and actually enjoy the time I had with my dad as best I could. And I'm so grateful for that, because he was completely right. I didn't lose him to cancer. I lost him, like I said, to a burst stomach ulcer. And so had I been fighting with him about something that was uncontrollable in terms of, his actions and a disease that I couldn't control and didn't even take him from us in the end, I would have wasted the last couple of years of my dad over something that, wasn't actually even worth my attention, really. And there's that side of spiritual stress. And then there's also the other side, which is when we're connected to ourselves, we are connected to our intuition, we hear the messages and then we totally disregard everything that it says. So that's when we are going against our own authenticity, our own soul's blueprint, essentially, of what we know is right for us, whether that's work, whether it's relationships, whether it's, just being in alignment with your true self rather than the labels of the outside world.
No, that's okay. So I was going to ask you more about, you said you followed your soul's guidance and you talked about your soul's blueprint. I wonder if you could tell me more about that, because that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, of course. So I believe, as do a lot of spiritual texts and teachers, that every single soul has a unique expression, and your soul comes here just as, I'm different to you, and you can see every single person is different. Every soul comes to the divine blueprint of what it knows it's good at, what its, what its talents are and what it's here to express, essentially. And that can be, anything from being the best mother possible and being that nurturing self to being, someone who's destined to be president of the United States, whatever it is. So really it's kind of knowing what your soul is authentically here to express and how you can actually come back to being in alignment with that. And when we are in alignment with our soul's true self, that's when we feel completely, in flow and in peace, and sort of knowing that we don't feel friction and resistance, feeling like we're doing something just for the sake of what other people around us want us to do, or because society says we should be doing it. And instead we're doing things that make us feel energized and really alive and really vibrant. And that's when your soul is really like, yes, this is what you're here for. Well done, sort of encouraging you in that sense.
Yeah.
And it's really, for me, there's a concept actually I talked about in the book in Spiritual Stress, which is called entelechy, which is, I think it was Socrates, well, one of those great Greek philosophers, I think it was Socrates, but talk about this concept in ancient Greek times called entelechy, which is quite literally your divine potential. And so I loved that concept because in that he says entelechy is about your own unique divine potential. So for example, an acorn, when watered, could never become a cherry tree because that's not its entelechy, but it can become a great oak if you water it correctly. And so it's about knowing what your own individual divine potential is. And I think that's something we all have within us. Every single person has something really unique to bring to the world. And I think we also need to look at it in a different way. A lot of people think of like purpose has to be this huge thing, like, okay, I have to save the planet, and if I haven't found that, then that's I don't have purpose. And and that's also completely untrue. Like I said, some people's purpose in this lifetime is to be the greatest teacher in the world, and that also translates to teaching other people and various day-to-day activities and conversations as much as it does being an actual teacher or being the greatest, father or mother in the world. And, it doesn't have to be these huge things, but equally other people's can be, because that's what your soul decided on before it came here. So I believe that greatly, that your soul sort of knew what it's coming here to do. And it's up to us to get our human ego out of the way to actually be able to allow it to do that.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, thank you. And actually feels really peaceful when you talk about it in that way, where your soul becomes into alignment. And I want to go back actually to the test that I noticed for myself. So for me, my highest one, I think it came in at 60% that I was physically stressed, and I was really quite unaware at that point of. I know you mentioned earlier about the physical aches and pains. And I noticed that perhaps I was starting to take ibuprofen before I'd even got a headache, because I was quite worried about, kept having headaches. Some days I felt like I couldn't lift my arms up because of my grief. And I was turning to being a workaholic, really, as a way to survive and to get through. So I didn't want to think about things. So when I saw that test, I saw, goodness, actually, I'm really physically stressed. And then I think within a couple of months, I came into the online session in the community. And you got us all you said, right, I want you to ask yourself, how are you feeling? How often do you ask yourself how you are feeling? And I sat there as a therapist and I thought to myself, inside, I thought, I ask myself all the time. And you got us to do where we connected with our body. And we put our hands on our heart and we asked, how is our heart feeling today? And you did a couple of techniques, actually, where you got us to really feel into our body about the sensations of where the emotions will start. And I couldn't believe that I could feel that my womb was really hurting and that it was my grief. And so I sat there, and what I realised was that, yes, I did ask myself every day how I'm feeling, but I would ask myself how I'm physically feeling. So I'd think to myself, I'm so tired. I can remember going to put my lip gloss on, I think, for something, and my teeth were chattering in the mirror. I felt absolutely wired. So I think that was another a penny drop, I call it, that I realised that I thought, goodness me. So I know how I'm in touch with how I physically feel, but emotionally, I feel really scared to process grief. And then there was another instance, I think, in the next session, because actually, again, I think the universe aligned for me to come just at this time where you have been looking at emotional stress, has been the theme, hasn't it, for this season? Yeah. So I thought to myself, I read about that we could view our emotions as if they are visitors. And actually, I've worked in universities as a counsellor for many years. So I used to say to the students, I'd say to them, look, we've got to make a friend of this anxiety. And you'd see their face, they'd look at me a bit like, well, who needs a friend called anxiety? But again, I hadn't turned it inwards to think about my own so grief and anger as so I think I was viewing them then. I thought, right, well, I'll view them as visitors because they feel really uncomfortable to me. So if I feel that they're going soon, then this is good. However, I think it was Mo responded in the chat to say that he viewed his emotions as friends. I thought, goodness, well, that's actually a real reframe for me because I think he was saying they've got something to tell us. So I really went away and I reflected on it, and it was as if I could make friends with them and see what they had to tell me. And then I know you spoke about the emotion spiral. So honestly, I've had so many helpful tips because again, that was another part that I looked at, and I think you addressed me. I'd put something in the chat again, and you were saying that if you had a look at that grief being at the bottom, and in fact, actually, do you want to talk a little bit more about that emotion spiral?
The emotional scale. It's interesting you say that, Michelle, because a lot of people don't understand the connection between their emotions and their physical ailments. How we can. Chinese medicine has known this for centuries, but the West, obviously, it's always behind when it comes to everything we're now returning to, which has been around thousands of years, which I love, in those kind of deeper healing senses that are less just about science and the mind and more about the connection holistically of everything. Mm-hmm. And they look, obviously, in Chinese medicine of, for example, they associate the lungs with grief. I got really bad pneumonia after my dad died. So it was like 6 months or 7 months until COVID. I can't remember. I was really in the depth of grief, and I got such bad pneumonia in my lungs because I was, because it was quite literally, I hadn't processed enough, and my body was really struggling. And so it's interesting when you look at those things, what the meanings of certain illnesses are, with them, depending on what organ they're in, which I love as well. But it's the sort of the combination of emotional and physical, I find really, really fascinating. And how can we learn to actually process our emotions? Like you said then, so many of us, and so often we forget to actually ask ourselves how we feel, and emotionally, not physically. Like you say, you think, oh, I feel quite well, I feel energized, I feel whatever it is, but what's that actual feeling emotionally? And when you talked about the body, me getting you guys to do techniques to go into the body for your emotions. Mm-hmm. I was studying sort of shamanic healing, and in that sense, and that's what ancient shamans really believe, that the body is an extension of the mind, and also is a bridge to the soul. So it can tell you intuitively with those messages, those sensations, how you're feeling. And it's about being courageous enough for us to tune into our feelings and our emotions without, the more we push them away, the more scared we get. When actually, I always say a negative feeling is only ever trying to alert you to one of two things: something within yourself that you need to heal, or something outside of yourself that you need to take action on and change. That's really the simplicity of it. So it's looking at which way is it, and how can we be courageous enough to just give that negative, that uncomfortable feeling attention. And of course, I'm not saying that's easy for some things, but it's quite literally what your emotion is going to get louder and louder and wave at you until you do. And we think the more we ignore it, the quieter it will get. And it's actually the other way around, as you know. So, yeah.
Well, and when we look at, so I've got some stats for the UK here. So when I was having a look at, researching before we met, so it says that in the UK, inpatient hospital admissions that were stress related cost around 8.13 billion in the UK. And I'm a mental health instructor trainer as well, so I teach about stress. And I think this is good to hear, to bring in about, so I'll ask you in a minute about the difference between pressure and stress and anxiety. But in fact, actually, I might ask you now, how would you describe, what is the difference between pressure and stress?
So, I mean, pressure, for me, I look at stress as the actual, sort of bodily, the bodily response. It's your actual fight and flight to pressure. So pressure can just be when we feel, just a bit like almost overwhelmed, just feeling a bit like, okay, everything's getting on top of me. But the actual stress that then comes into our system is when we've really been in that fight and flight, and our body system is going off, trying to protect us, trying to keep us safe.
Yeah.
But usually it's not for a life or death situation. It's for the stresses of the modern world, because, as you know, the modern world sets our stress response off in the same way that a lion can and used to back in the olden days, and it hasn't caught up with this crazy world that we brought ourselves into now, with all the many, many triggers and alarm bells. And then, with stress and anxiety is actually a product of stress, because anxiety is an emotion. So it's an emotional response to stress, and very high stress response. Very actually, when we're feeling anxious, we are usually worrying very much about something that we want to try and sort out in the future, worrying how we'll handle it, what will we do, how is it going to affect me? And so, it really is that emotional response to something that's really stressed you out, really.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. Because what I found fascinating as well was that, because I think we all need to have some pressure. Pressure, is good for us. It makes me get up out of bed in the morning. I need to earn some money. However, that stress is bad for us. I know some people will describe it as good stress. I'd say perhaps more pressure.
Well, pressure then in that sense is like eustress, so you have eustress and distress, and eustress, stress, that's spelled that way, is the good kind of stress, which is that stress that goes on and then comes off. So it's like when not me, but was running a race and needed to win the race, and I've run the race. I've stressed before, my body's preparing for it. I run the race and then I win in my dream, and then don't actually win the race, and then the stress response comes off. Or you have a big meeting that you've been preparing for, and again you've got that build up of pressure before, then you do the meeting and your stress response comes off. That's good stress, like you say, it's the stuff that causes us to perform better. But distress, which is what chronic stress is over the long term, simmering in the background, actually just wears our system down in all the other ways. And we think we're doing more, we think we're more productive, we think we're doing better, but we're not at all. We're 31% less productive when we're stressed than when we're happy. And start to get all the physical ailments and all the other symptoms that we talked about a bit briefly earlier. So,
Because so what I know, and do come in here as well, is that so when our body is continually under stress and we've got cortisol that is kicking out, so we've got our double helixes, haven't we, for our DNA, and at the bottom it's like, this isn't the correct medical terminology, but it's like the bottom of your shoelace strings that keep your shoelaces together, and you have that at the bottom of your DNA. I think it's telomeres. But with the cortisol, will then start to corrode the bottom of your DNA, which is why we get the rogue DNAs going around. And that's why it's been linked to being carcinogenic. And I know in both of our journeys, we've faced loved ones that have left this world due to cancer. So it's not to be the doom buster, but we realise just how important it is that when 1 in 2 of us will get a diagnosis of cancer in our lifetimes now. So I really appreciated when I did that test, that I thought, goodness, I need to sort out this physical stress and need to process these emotions. And so if I go back to the, I've printed off some of the wonderful resources actually, because so I know that you've got meditations on there. You've also got journal prompts, because sometimes it can be really difficult for people to, even though they hear that journaling is good for them, I think having a template that they can sit down and go through to answer the questions. I think one of my favourites was the wellbeing awareness that really gets you to go through. So I didn't know whether you wanted to talk a little bit more about the resources that people can
Yeah.
access to.
Yeah, I mean, I love, journaling was one of the first things that it was one of the first healing modalities I started to use on myself when I was in that sort of don't know which way to look, where do I even start researching first? And I'd seen a book, I think it was The Artist's Way, and some other things online about journaling and just the importance of morning pages and how obviously therapeutic writing is. And as you'll know, it's now actually seen as a modality that's recognized as a therapeutic modality, like art therapy and dance. And journaling for me, I know that I find it very easy to free flow and just allow whatever emotions, thoughts, anything to come up. I always laugh thinking to myself, with my friend, I was like, gosh, if someone finds my journals, because they really are. I've processed a lot in the last 10 years, and I should probably have a cleanse and do a bonfire or something, but I use them for research, for work as much as anything as well. And it's amazing what you really comes out of you unfiltered. And that's the whole point. There's no judgment on the paper. It's just you and whatever's meant to come out, whatever your heart and your mind need to get out of you. And some people can find it really hard, like you say, to just sit and do okay, well, where do I start? Or how do I feel? Even as a question, I don't even know how I feel. And, starting that process. So that's why we do the journal prompts every month. Like, we create those to sort of around a certain theme, but to give an outline of, say, 8 to 10 questions that you can use as those prompts. So at least then, if you're struggling to just let it all out on paper, you can just answer the questions at your own pace and try that way. And then, as you know, the other bit is the Reiki meditations. So I'm a Reiki master, and I love energy work in all different aspects. I've done a lot of different healing stuff myself and different trainings, and I still research different healers and modalities, because I just find it so fascinating. Because again, for me, it was actually something that I really didn't believe in, understand, or know about. So I will openly say that to people. If people are listening now thinking, oh my God, what is Reiki? I was the same at one point. I found Reiki, well, Reiki found me really after I was in therapy after my sister died, and everything was going on in my family. And I was trying to sort of process stuff. And at the time, my 25-year-old self, I'd never seen a therapist before. And this particular therapist, I'm a big believer in the right chemistry fit for whether it's whoever's helping you. It's like a relationship, anything, isn't it? If it's not the right chemistry, if it's not the right fit, then it's not going to get the best out of you. And she was a great therapist, but it wasn't the right modality for me, because she would just sort of sit and, stare me out, essentially, waiting for me to sort of say something. And my 25-year-old self was, full of all that trauma, hadn't processed any of it, and was just a bit like, I don't even know where to start or what to say. Do you know what I mean? That's just too much going on. And so she did recognize that perhaps I needed a bit of opening up. And so she had a holistic practice, in that she had a Reiki healer in the building. And so she said to me after a session, she was like, there's a Reiki healer in my building. I think you should try and do some sessions alongside our sessions. And I was like, what on earth is Reiki? But I thought to myself, well, at this point, I'm so all over the place, I'll try anything. And so I went to go and have, the first session of Reiki, and I felt really relaxed. And I felt the feeling of energy around my head. But I, was like, oh, that was relaxing. And off I went home. And the second, and then after the third, I suddenly realized that compression, that feeling of an elephant being sat on my chest that had been built up in grief and had been sort of building because of knowing that we were going to lose my sister, that pressure had actually disappeared, not the emotions, but that feeling of like an elephant being sat on my chest after 3 sessions of Reiki. And I thought to myself, oh, what is this? This is fascinating. And that's how I really got into all energy work from that moment. So for me, it's been a fun journey with it. It's still ever evolving. I will continue to always want to learn more about energy. And that's why when I ended up doing my Reiki masters, I realized, you work more with energy then to be able to also do it distance healing and to be able to do different techniques. And I basically developed my own technique, essentially, of being able to install. I thought, well, if we can do that, then I could do that. So I just sort of put it all together and thought, how can I, I'll put Reiki, actually install it and fuse it essentially into my recorded guided meditations. And so it just allows people, I hope, to relax a little bit quicker than they would do from just a normal guided meditation, because it's the combination of both voice and energy at the same time. And I find it's helpful for people who really struggle with meditation as well.
Yes. And so can I unpack that a little bit more? So when I listen to the meditations, is that where it's infused into the music that you are using in the guided meditation, or how does it work?
So I basically, when I record them, I bring Reiki in as I'm recording it myself.
Ah,
So I bring Reiki into myself and ask for it to be put into the actual recording, essentially with my
yes.
voice. And then I also make sure you have symbols in Reiki. So you get your different, it sounds a bizarre process, but it's sort of, you get attuned to different symbols as you do your different levels. And when you do your masters, you get attuned to the distance healing symbol, and to your master symbol. And the master symbol brings in lots of different other symbols into one,
Yeah.
which can be emotional healing, physical healing, various things. And then the distance healing symbol is that ability to be able to, take a guided session online and people to feel Reiki, or to be able to put it into what I know as a meditation. So, yeah, I do this sort of Reiki process myself when I'm recording it all. And then also when it's actually being saved, as crazy as that sounds, on my computer, I do it again whilst it's sort of going through.
Mm.
And that might sound bizarre to people. I know it did to me once upon a time, but I'm a massive believer in, actually, we all have the ability to sort of, be able to tune into these things, but equally for, energy to not be just about where you are, to be able to be somewhere else at the same time.
Yeah. And it sounds to me that you're embodying that, aren't you? Is that part of that energy that's going into that healing meditation?
Yeah.
And that leads me to, so is this where, I know we touched on it earlier about our soul's blueprint, but is this also how you'd access the Akashic records then?
No, so the Akashic records are a whole different process. It's funny.
Ah,
Yeah, they basically get. So I did my Akashic records with a Akashic records healer, a doctor called Dr. Brim Patel in America, and we did it online actually as well. My
mm,
whole courses, but I've always been very fascinated by the Akashic records. So for those people who don't know what those are, Akashic records are essentially the energetic library of what your soul. So I'm a big believer in past lives. Mo would call them what's the word, parallel lives, because he's
yeah.
all about quantum physics and time and stuff.
Mm,
And so, but past lives, for the sake of the conversation, I'm a big believer in past lives as
yeah.
humans, as different versions of the soul expressing itself in many different lives.
Yeah.
There's even an amazing book called Only Love is Real. I don't know if you've ever read
No,
that, which is
I will look
about,
up that.
oh, it's amazing. It's a doctor who had done past life regressions with
Mm,
people in hypnosis, taking them back to different lifetimes. And he had two patients at the same time. And he realized that these patients were talking about the same stories of love in each lifetime. And he had both of them as patients, and they hadn't met in this lifetime yet.
wow.
So eventually, he was like having it from both sides, all these different characters, and he was just, absolutely blown away. And eventually, he told them about each other, and they met in this lifetime, and so it became a million copies sold book. It's an amazing
Mm,
book,
yeah.
but it's just about, again, that sort of, what I truly believe is that understanding of that we have had, many lives. And it's that for me, that explains some very funny things, like, how some people have a fear of heights in this lifetime, and they just don't understand why, because they've never had an experience in this particular lifetime that should have caused that. Or, when you just get a sense of, like I had with, Mo, for example. Mo and
Mm,
I call each other family, and we feel like we've known each other forever. And when we first started, working on this stuff and met and started writing the book, on
mm,
paper at the time, it was like, why are we working together? Because, Mo is Mo, and he's done so much in his life, and he's, this ex Google exec. And it's funny, because for us it makes total sense, and we believe that it's sort of, we feel like we've known each other forever. And
yeah.
I believe we've had many, well, I know actually, because I went into my Akashic records, we've had, many
Mm,
lives together in different capacities. And this is our sort of mission together in this one. And the Akashic records is essentially that, it's the energetic library, to put it as simply as that, in the universe that houses all the past life details and actually future as well of your soul. And so you can go in and delve into, experiences you've had. You can use it for, I've used it in the past for clients to help them to see if there's anything that's causing them stress from past life that's coming into this life. And yeah, it allows you, so you get attuned again in a longer process, but you get attuned to essentially a prayer that allows you to access guidance with your sort of spiritual team and the team of the Akashic Records. You call them the keepers of the Akashic Records, to be able to go into those. You can't go into other people's without their permission. That's the whole process in itself within the prayer. But you can go into your own before you have permission of other people. But equally, you can do it for, what's amazing is you can do it for buildings, you can do it for, places, you can do it for animals, you can do it for relationships. There's a sort of record of that relationship rather than just the person. It's very complicated and complex in a nice way. You can really do a lot of different things with it. And it's a fun little process. I know it's hard for some people to think, oh gosh, what is that? Sure. But I think that a lot of us can relate to that feeling of just feeling like, that person when you've met them, and you're like, I know this person. Why do I feel like I've known them my whole life? That feeling. And that's the most common sort of example I can give people to, thinking that way.
Yeah, and that sometimes we can't explain things, can we? It's believing in the unseen. It's definitely something that I want to explore in this coming year. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
No, of course.
And I want to come back as well. So to let people know about the online community then and about joining. So would they be tied in, or how does it work? I know at the moment I pay a monthly fee, which actually I thought for people who, we look at the UK, there's this cost of living crisis. And just talking about the UK here, I know there's an economic crisis everywhere. But I thought, well, what a fantastic way for people that perhaps can't afford to, say, have weekly therapy, but they're able to have something that's affordable and accessible to them. So just a little bit about how it works.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. No, that's what we wanted, to create a space where, like we said, not just us, but, other people will come in, guest experts. We've had Tori on before, who you met at the retreat, who's an incredible trauma specialist and great friend of mine. And she's done a guest expert session that's recorded in there. And, another amazing person called Maya, who did a visualization session. And we'll be definitely getting a lot more different people in the new year as well to add to it, because we wanted to create something that is, it's basically what I needed at that time that I couldn't find. So with that, I spent hours and hours and hours researching and finding all these different things and modalities. And mine and Mo's book essentially puts our last 10 years of our work together in one place. And that's what the membership does as well, whether it's, the work we've done professionally and with clients, or whether it's our personal experiences. So we wanted to create something that was, affordable for people to be able to have a monthly subscription and to be able to cancel any time if they can't continue, and to come back in when they want to. But equally, like you say, it's about having something that's, it's got those tools, it's got that community space to keep going, and those resources, and then also that actual online sessions with Mo and myself. I think for me, having researched and done a lot of this stuff, whether it's on myself or just looking at the market before we did this, I couldn't find a membership that gave what we gave. And in that was, those actual live webinars and interactions with the tools. And that's what we really wanted to bring for people, because we know, like you talking about community and working on your own, and, being able to have that shared, that it's just such a nice thing to be able to bring people together once a month and to be able to actually interact with them.
Yeah, brilliant. Could you say about the demographic of people that are part of the community at the moment?
Yeah, it's funny because I think probably because of Mo and myself being different demographics, we have such a, varied demographic. And the youngest member at the moment is 19, I think.
Well,
18, 19.
Fantastic.
And then the eldest is probably late 60s. So, you have a big big range there, obviously.
Yeah.
And, there's actually, it's slightly more female, but there are a lot of men in there as well, because obviously Mo and I are, we've got him and we've got me. So it is, that is nice to have that as well, because I think it's been really nice to see more and more men join recently. I know I've always, and that made me very happy, because from working with clients, with my stress consultancy and coaching, I've worked with individuals as well as companies, and actually all my one-to-one clients tended to be men, because I think that it was that kind of, okay, well, I can do this and by myself, and no one's going to see, and I can have that space, and that's amazing. Those sort of like executive, like business guys who just want to get it done themselves. And I used to have a very small community myself. A few years ago, which I guess was also the universe's little test to help me to learn this, which was great. And that was actually all women, in the community one, and all my private clients were men. And I thought, gosh, that's really interesting how men and women, women want that community space, and men want to like sort of be private and deal with this sort of stuff themselves. And so while that can also still be true, I think it's been really amazing to see that change with this in the last few months, and for more and more men to come in and even be at the retreat. And it's nice to see, because it's definitely something for everyone in terms of, it's definitely not just for women. That's for sure.
Yeah, lovely. Because I noticed at the retreat, I did see that there were some men there, but I thought it'd be great to see more men feeling more able to come forward, just as you were saying, to access that support.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you then, I think as we'll come to an end. So to really summarise, if you were to give our listeners one key piece of information or key piece of wisdom when they are feeling stressed, what would it be?
Ooh, that is a good question, Michelle. As you know, it's like one thing is so hard. But for me, actually, when we are feeling stressed, my greatest sort of key piece of wisdom would be actually to spend time in silent reflection in terms of what it is that you truly need internally. Because so often we think about, when we're stressed, okay, well, it's my mind, and I'll just get on with this, and my thoughts are all over the place, I'm worried about work, I'm stressed, and this and that. That's so often actually not even the root cause of our stress. The root cause of our stress can be something so much more, it's actually like you've been neglecting the fact that you haven't spent any time with your relationships because of work, and you're feeling completely out of balance, and your soul is craving human connection. Or perhaps you've been so stressed with work, and it's actually work that you shouldn't be doing, but you're just on that rabbit, hamster wheel, just doing what you think you should be doing. So there's many things, as different techniques we can do that are so in depth in the different aspects of, dealing with our thoughts and, processing our emotions, dealing with that physical stress. But I think actually it's really important for people to learn to just connect with your soul and just sit quietly with your hand over your heart and ask yourself, okay, what do I actually need? And see what comes up for you, instead of what you think you need and what might help it. Because our soul's always much wiser than our mind, but we never look to it for help when we need it most. And so it's really about looking at that, that inner guidance we all have, and not turning away from that when we're stressed, which we so often do. We look outwards. How can I fix this? Instead of going inwards. So for me, it would really be going inwards and going into your heart and your soul to really actually see what you truly need.
Oh, well, I think that is a brilliant piece of wisdom. Thank you so much for joining me and for your time today.
Oh, no,
it's been great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. And, it's been so wonderful to see you again in your face. It's so nice to get to know the members better, particularly, like you said, from the retreat, the online sessions to podcasts. It's really, really lovely. And thank you for having me. I'll definitely also give you a code for your subscribers for Unstressable.
Perfect. Yeah, lovely, Alice. Thank you so much.